good afternoon, and welcome to our Filmmaker Talk with director Nishtha Jain. She had her IDFA premiere last night with her new film, The Golden Thread. Just out of curiosity, how many people have seen the film here? Oh, great, a couple people. Okay. So this isn't so much an opportunity to talk in depth about one film, but because Nishtha is here with us for the full hour, we can really delve into her practice, the history of, making work in a certain place and time, and her preoccupations as a whole, the themes that have obsessed her over the years, and really getting to know who she is and why she does what she does. So welcome, Nishtha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Um, I would just want to start in a broader context in terms of going back to the beginning of you working in fiction, virtual reality, working in multimedia, working in all different sorts of forms, including journalism, including a different approach. So, what is it about the documentary form, and in particular the long form of telling a story where you might insinuate yourself, you might not. But how did the preoccupations of wanting to perhaps get closer to potential protagonists and tell fuller stories about your society? When did that begin for you? When did that sort of realization occur? And what were your first steps towards that?
So I was I started off my career as a video editor uh, during during a time where there was only one channel, government channel in India, and so it was controlled news, and there was this thing called video magazines that got
Mm,
introduced at the time that would bring you alternative news. So they would have like 1 hour of programming with a hard political story, a soft story, a social story, etc. And most of it was, and they were very good. I mean, content-wise, but most of it were formatted, like A
mhm.
roll, B roll stories. So whether it was something in Kashmir or whether it was about the demolition of the Babri Masjid or some other story, everything would finally start go down to looking the same. But I was handling like really interesting hundreds of hours of material, and I felt after some time I started feeling that I'm not able to do justice to what there is in the material because of this
Right,
format.
right.
So I wanted to get out of it, and then I think after a year or so, and I started watching a lot of films and cinema, etc. So I was very interested in started getting interested in cinema with the big C. So I went to film school. I joined the film school after working, and specialized in film direction. And so the film school focused only on fiction. So
Ah,
that, yeah.
okay.
So we didn't learn any documentary there as such. And of course, we saw films, but we, did fiction. But when I came out, I wanted to do documentaries, but in a different style, not what was prevalent at that time in India. And we were not very exposed to documentaries from the West because we didn't have these being shown on television,
Mhm.
and there weren't so many film festivals, and we weren't traveling so much either. So we hadn't really seen. We had seen some in the film school, of course,
Mhm.
but
What
not
do you
contemporary.
remember a couple of the films you saw, documentaries that really
Yeah. Yes.
inspired you or sparked this passion for making
Yes,
nonfiction?
Chris Marker's Sans Soleil, and of course we saw Godard's, in initial documentaries,
Mhm.
and films like that. But they were very iconic and very very important films, and Jean Rouge. So those had a lot of impact on
Mhm.
us. So I was very interested in that, and I was very clear I didn't want to have a career in the mainstream cinema. I didn't see myself as part of it because for me the important lesson was that I want to be independent, because I'd already worked, and I was very sure whatever I do, I have to be independent. And there was no funding for documentary, so it was already taking a very, very hard route
Mm-hmm.
to being independent and expressing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So so the very first film that I do, which is City of Photos, is a like a sort of a combination style. It's kind of almost entirely scripted based on my research and recce, and but it's the dialogues are not written, because I could never write the dialogues, or for the people, because they're brilliant. I would never want to do that. So everything is sort of planned, and but then I, within the frame, I let the people be, as
Mm-hmm.
they are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different sort, it was a different kind of approach to documentary. But after that, I started to sort of stop scripting so much, and started, my style became more cinema verite, but still with a lot of poise, and uh, which was coming from, and planning, which was coming from my fiction background.
Right.
So I didn't really sort of let go, okay, handheld camera. And so I think when I did that for the first time in Lakshmi and Me, like literally my camera person, she said, Nishtha, you have to stop, take away the camera from the tripod and hold it in your hand and just do it, go with it. And for
Was
me,
that
it
very
was,
liberating for you?
it, it was because, before that, I sort of saw films in very designed frames, and, like it was like that. So, in a way, Lakshmi and Me, not only because of the subject of the film, what it's doing in the film, where I'm actually exploring uh, a relationship with a person who comes to my house and
Mm-hmm.
works. And because also at that time in India, it was this person, there has been no history as such uh, of documentaries either made inside your home or actually touching these kind of subjects,
Mm-hmm.
because most of the filmmaking was confined to big social issues, the political
Right.
issues. But for me, I felt that personal is also political, or
Mm-hmm.
political is personal uh, as well. So I wanted to look like, if you want to talk about caste, you want to talk about gender, but I want to talk about it because you cannot talk about it separately. You have to talk about it at the intersection of caste and gender.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sort of and that's how I thought I'll approach this film in a much more intimate sort of a way, because that's where you see it playing out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also so much about not about each one of these things, but it's not just about caste or class or gender, but it's also about how aware. So it's not about identity, but it's also about how you play out your privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you if you are, or you want to communicate these kind of ideas, then the filming also has to change. It can't be just taking interviews of people, and
Mm-hmm.
it itself has to revolutionize how you look at the filming itself. It has to
Right.
also question the filming. So that's when I started also addressing this aspect of how what is the role of the camera in the house, and who's wielding the camera, what is the power of the camera. I already refer to it in City of Photos, but here that awareness is much more acute, and it's played out like, so the film is self-reflexive. It's as questioning of me,
Mm-hmm.
questioning of my power, questioning of and entering with some sort of a romantic notion to do this sort of a film. So it questions the very act of filming itself while it does it.
And you have been, you've been working with the same small team your entire career. Um, and does this also give you a lot more freedom? Because now I would imagine, I mean, we'll show visual samples, but you just made a film that's much wider in scope, cinematically and in every other way, a more complex story about the people, but also about a place, about an institution, about a lot of things. Um, can you talk a little bit about those collaborations and why you've been so loyal to this partnership, um, and what it has allowed you to do, visually and also dramaturgically, that would perhaps be a bit more challenging if you're constantly expanding your apparatus, let's say, and making it much more complicated, much more, bigger in a sense in terms of the apparatus of the crew, the camera you might use, the sound equipment, and all the attendant accoutrements that larger productions have to use or
Uh,
feel they have to use, I should
well,
say.
that's such a great question because actually, when we were doing Gulabi Gang, we were given, we were told by our production that you can have an Alexa. And I refused it. I said, no, I don't want an Alexa. I want a small camera. Because when we were following the leader of Gulabi Gang, Sampat Pal, she walks fast and you would never know. It was unpredictable what would happen. So,
Right.
you had to have a handheld camera. You had to be ready, to be able to film what was happening because, and definitely didn't want to recreate anything or tell her, okay, or guide them, okay, speak like this, because no, it had to be captured as it is. And so Rakesh Haridas, who has, I mean, Golden Thread is his sixth film with him, and the sound designer and the recordist, sound designer. It's also my sixth film with them, fifth or sixth, something like this. Yeah. So when you are doing that kind of filming, they have to know you. They have to know how and what the director is would want.
Hmm.
Even though I'm here, I cannot, I can just tell them, oh, just look, something is happening there. But they have to be at that moment my eyes or my ears, and even better than my eyes and ears, because sometimes you're noticing something, but it's also how Rakesh has moved from one character to another because he's
Hmm.
seen a little gesture or something in the eyes or
Hmm.
something that he's noticed, which maybe I have not noticed because I'm seeing everything at a time. But through the lens, you're
Right.
framing, and you're noticing those. So the film, comes alive in those movements, in capturing of those movements.
Hmm.
And for that, it cannot be someone just entirely new. And you could, if you had a scripted film, you could work with someone, where you planned everything, etc., but not when you depended so much on capturing the live documentary moment, which cannot be repeated. it
Exactly.
has to it has to be someone who knows you very well,
Hmm.
whom you worked with. And the same thing in terms of sound as well. But for a moment, I'd like to talk about sound designing for the Golden Thread, which I think most of the sound was designed online. I mean, I was away. I was in Paris editing another film, and Neeraj was working on his own. But and I did go back a couple of times to
Hmm.
see what he was doing with the design. And it's his work to a large extent.
Yes.
It's his expression,
Yes.
it's what he's bringing in. And I know that. But I
Hmm.
know that he's going to change the film almost 50%. He's going to make it, sometimes even 100%. And with Neeraj, I don't have something called a picture lock. Because sometimes you could say, Nishtha, I want to do that with the sound, so can we change the picture a bit? And I'm not advising
Interesting.
this to anyone, but
No, but
I would
that's
change the picture because he wanted some
right.
extra frames or one extra second, or I would change that because for me sound is really important. And as
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
But it's marvelous that you can have so much trust in a collaborator like that. I'd like to briefly pause and show the clip we have from Gulabi Gang,
okay,
and then we'll
right.
unless you want to finish a thought. I'm sorry, I don't want to
Yeah, no,
interrupt
but
you.
I mean, I would like to introduce that clip for
Yes,
Gulabi Gang.
absolutely,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because also, like, so we are making a film about Gulabi Gang, and she's a leader, feminist leader and fighter and all that. And then, I mean, we're telling that side of the story, these brave women. But people are always complex, They're
Yes.
not just always heroes. They're always sides to people. And for me, the complexity of the characters is much more important than any kind of hagiography or showing heroes, because I don't believe, I mean, of course they are heroes, but even heroes have different sides. And even so, So this moment comes in the film when suddenly a member of Gulabi gang, uh, his her sister gets killed by her brother. So this is a Gulabi gang leader, one of Gulabi gang leaders, and her sister has been killed by her own brother. And now this lady called Husna has to take a. It seems that she's protecting her brother, and that's a crazy situation,
Yeah.
right? So so Gulabi gang comes and says, no, you cannot protect your brother. I mean, eyewitnesses are saying that it's your brother who's killed the sister. So suddenly you cannot change your stance. So then the Gulabi gang comes to meet Husna. So this is the context of this clip. And for me, it's so important that this be captured without having to give directions
Of course.
to my cinematographer, because you cannot. It's happening in front of you, and you just have to trust your cinematographer to be able to catch the core of it. So and that the sound is ready and we are getting it. So yeah, we can. It's a long verbose clip, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
very very
It's good
interesting.
though. It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, let's play that.
ये कौन है? बिटिया हो तुम्हारी जी? अच्छा, हमारी बिटिया। आज मैं पहली बार आई हूँ आपके घर।
ये बताओ 3 दिन हुए 4 दिन कोर्ट मैरिज के, वो अगला आदमी से दुश्मनी थी क्या? ये मुझे
उसने जबरई किया था तो उसने जबरई करवाया।
नहीं, जबरई कोर्ट मैरिज हो गया
नहीं,
कोर्ट उसना एक गलत बात है।
तो आप
देखो,
मतलब
हम
ये ना, तो हम
मैं
थोड़ी
बता-
कह रहे कि गलत है,
नहीं,
सही है।
सुनो, अगर सही वास्तव में उसने मारा तो वो फंसे, और अगर भाई ने किया है तो भाई भी ना बचे। कल आज उसके साथ किया, कल तुम्हारे साथ भी कर सकता है,
हमारे
परसों
साथ हम
मेरे साथ
गलत
भी
करें तो
कर
हमें
सकता
खूब कर दे वो। हम गलत के साथ ही है ना,
नहीं,
गलत करते हैं।
सुनो, ऐसा
नहीं,
है।
हम तो कह रहे दीदी,
अरे भाई।
अगर हम गलत करें तो वो हमें मार दे, हमें
नहीं,
इजाजत
ऐसा
लेते
नहीं।
हैं।
सुनो,
ये
ऐसा
कि माने वो
नहीं।
बहनी गलत कर डाली से अपना जीवन साथी चुन लिया। अगर वो मतलब अगर भाई को कह रहे कि उसने गलत किया तो गलत में मार दिया, तो
नहीं,
हमें
काहे
भी अगर
मार
गलत
दे?
करे तो हमें भी मार
नहीं,
सकता है।
बालिक में सब कोई अपने शरीर का जिम्मेदार होता है।
अगर आपको लगा है कि मैंने अपने भतीजे का बयान बदलाया है,
नहीं,
तो ये कुरान
अभी क्या हो तो मैं अभी उठा लूं।
है वही
मैं
बात।
अपने बच्चे इधर आ रहे।
नहीं, बच्चों की कसम
मैं
नहीं
सच्चाई
खाना।
पर कसम खाऊंगी।
अरे तो किसी ने तुम्हारा नाम कौन ले रहा?
अरे सुनो,
मैं
तुम्हारे
इसी
लड़का
बच्चे की
ये
कसम खा रही हूँ। अगर मैंने अपने बच्चे से उससे बयान बदलवाए हो और कहा हो तो मेरे बच्चा काम ना आए।
अरे हम ये तो नहीं करवाना
मगर
चाहते।
मुझे कह रहे ना,
मैं कहती
तो
हूँ
मैं कसम खा रही हूँ कि मैं अगर कुतवाल के अगर अलावा मैंने बच्चे से बात करी हूँ, तुम लोग थी सब ये बता सकते सब
नहीं,
लोग।
तो वो बच्चों को किसने कहा?
अब मुझे तो मैंने कहा हम क्या घंटे बाद आए लहास की।
2 घंटे बाद
वही सिखाया होगा भाई, वही जरूरी नहीं है कि हुस्न
मगर
सिखाया
मैंने ये भी बता दिया था दीदी से कि दीदी पहले वो कुछ कह रहे थे, अब कुछ कह रहे हैं, बयान में बदले हैं उन्होंने। आज नहीं आए तो मुझे टाइम आती है अगर साथ
काहे
देने
के
का तो।
लिए आए बताओ?
वाह,
हम
कैसे
तो आज भी ना आते। चाय पी आए हैं। अरे पियो। हमसे आप बेकार तेहा दिखा रही हो, हैं? तुम्हारे उसमें नहीं।
हमने आपसे ये तो कहानी का तुमसे यही कहा था कि दीदी आके थोड़ी आप भी देख लो, आप भी समझ लो।
क्या समझ लूं मैं?
अगर हम आपसे ये कह देते कि हाँ तुम हमारे भाई को बचा लो तो उसमें गलत होता। हमें तो तुमसे कुछ नहीं कहा।
अरे हमारा आपका कोई बटा नहीं
मुझे
है, सही
सच्चाई खिलाने तो ऐसा है कि मेरा भाई खिलाफ रहता है इस चीज में, ठीक है ना।
हाँ
वो नहीं चाहता कि हमारी बहनें गलत करें।
सही है।
हाँ, भाई खिलाफ रहता है, सही।
वो नहीं पसंद करता कि मेरी बहनें
अच्छा, तो
बच्चालन
वो-
हो जाएं, मेरी
नहीं,
बहनें
नहीं,
गलत
नहीं,
हो जाएं।
वो
या
कोई
मैं-
नहीं चाहता।
तो
वो
बस
तुम्हारे भाई
मैं
नहीं,
नहीं
सबके
कह
भाई
सकती कि
ऐसा
मेरा
करते
भाई भी कर सकता और नहीं भी कर सकता।
हाँ, ये भी सही है, आप बोली सही बात।
कर भी सकता नहीं भी कर सकता, हमें नहीं करता। मगर हमारा भाई इस चीजों से खिलाफ रहता। हमारे परिवार में हम आपको बता रहे, हमारे परिवार में हमारी जेठ की लड़की थी, उसके साथ हुआ था अन्याय। वो लड़की की आ गया था हमल, 6 महीने करीब का पेट में था। जब 4 जनों की निगाह में आया तो मेरे देवर ने खुद काटा था, अपने हाथ से मार डाला था अपनी बिटिया को, जेठ की लड़की को। हमारे परिवार में दीदी नहीं हुआ, मगर ये 2 बहनों ने हमारे परिवार की नाक कटा दिया।
तो वो परिवार भी सही नहीं है।
हाँ, बस यही
तो
बात है।
हुस्ना तुम अपना परिवार देखो, वहाँ आगे
दीदी
लगे
हम
हैं।
अपने परिवार से वैसे यार पूरा पड़ोस बता
तुम
सकते हैं अपने परिवार से हुआ
इनसे
है।
मतलब अब बिल्कुल ना रखो हुस्ना।
दीदी
अच्छा,
मैं
एक
पूरा
काम
पड़ोस
और
बता
करो।
सकता कि मेरे कब से
हुस्ना,
आना नहीं है, कब से खाना पीना
हुस्ना,
नहीं
हम
है।
तो
कुछ
दुकान
दिन
में देखते
एक
हैं
काम
कि
का और
तुम्हारे पापा
करो,
बैठे
कुछ
हैं।
दिन हमारे संगठन से अलग रहो। सुनो सुमन, कुछ दिन तुम हमारे संगठन से अलग रहो, इसलिए कि अगर हमारे साथ रहेंगी तो हमें हंगामा तो करने होगा। तो फिर तुम्हारे ऊपर कोई घटना भी हो सकती है। तो उनको कुछ दिन के लगेगा कि वो वहाँ उनके साथ नहीं रहती, उनका
अब
काम है।
इसमें हमें सच्चाई ढूंढनी पड़ेगी कि
सच्चाई
वो
तो हमको
सच्चा
ढूंढना
आदमी है।
पड़ेगा। हाँ,
हैं, इसको देख
भाई
रेख
मैंने गलत
करेंगे।
तो नहीं दीदी कहा।
जो
कुछ दिन
सच्चा-
तुम हमसे भी अलग रहो कि भैया मुझसे कोई मतलब नहीं है,
आपको
इसलिए
आप
कि
गैंग जाने।
5-6-7 बच्चे हैं आपके, कहीं उनका कोई नुकसान न हो जाए। आदमी जब बेरहम हो जाता है तो न बहनी देखे न बहनों देखे।
Yeah.
This I remember. I think I read this story, or maybe this is part of the introduction to Lakshmi and me, about how you call yourself a born feminist, or you were born a feminist, and you had brothers, and this whole notion of, your mother asking you to clean, and you say, yes, I'll clean, but only if my brothers also clean. And of course, the sort of suggestion that you're already coming into the world with these questions of gender, and these questions, but in a society where femicide, where women are subjected to what Western culture, I mean, which are horrible things, but in a Western guise, it's very hard for us to reconcile and understand, that there could be this kind of treatment of women. How important are your the focus you have on the women in the city who are taking things into their own hands and organizing things, because this is also reflected in the golden thread. It's usually the women who are the ones to step forward and organize, and to be loud and verbal about abuses, about ways in which they're being mistreated. Um, what is your own perspective on that, coming from a different class and coming from a different background? I mean, how does that influence the way in which you shoot certain people? And I think I'm alluding also to casting in a way. Like you say, the protagonists or the heroes of your film are really the most verbal, really the best storytellers, really the ones who can really articulate why and how things are the way they are and how they need to change.
Right. Oh, so that's a long
It's
question.
just,
Yeah,
it's a
but yeah.
theme I see in almost every single film you've ever done, from the
Yeah,
very
yeah,
beginning until
yeah.
now.
So yeah, it's true. I mean, I also grew up in a normal sort of a low middle class kind of a background, and where my mom, very gentle woman, was also like trying to, make me learn like housework that women should do, and I would like. Well, I was fighting with her all the time. I said, "But you never asked my brothers to do this." And so it was from, I think, when I was 6 to 7 years old. I mean, this was there because she would say, she would say, "Oh, you should learn to iron your clothes." Or I said, "How come my brothers are not ironing their own school dresses?" And she would say, "They don't know them." I said, "But I didn't learn it in some, I didn't go to a school to learn ironing. So why do they need any?" So, this kind of little stuff was always happening with my mother. I was always resisting being, being pushed into some sort of a stereotype that a woman has to be like this.
Hmm.
So that was always the thing. So, I mean, I don't know where it came from, but that's the way I was. I mean, that's my nature. So, always also attracted very much to women, who are also are able to break out of the stereotype, like Sampath Pal. I mean, she has absolutely no one around. She comes from a small village. She's studied in school till third grade.
Hmm.
She gets married at the age of 12, but
Hmm.
it is herself. There is no
Hmm.
one around her grandmother or mother asking her, telling her, or there are no role models around her. I mean, in her village, etc. She's pretty much self-made. So for me, those stories become very, very, very important. But within that story, what is also very important for me is that you can get empowered, but then you can also get powerful, and then the problem can be, how you negotiate the power that you have. And for me, that is also a very important part of the story, to be aware that you have a certain power and certain privilege, and how you exercise that. So that, in a way, that awareness is there in most of my film as well. So, for example, even in Lakshmi and Me, why did I make? If I wanted to talk about domestic workers, I could have actually gone and interviewed them,
Right.
and they would have, said something about them, and then something about the people whom they work for, and then I would have interviewed some house owners, and they would have talked about domestic workers, and they would have said, oh, they're lazy, or they're not, whatever. I could have done that kind of a story, but I felt that that's not the story I wanted to. I didn't want to tell that general story that we know about, we can read in a newspaper, because I wanted to talk about us, like, the middle class who exercise this privilege unknowingly, unconsciously, and are perpetrating that. Because when we talk about equality and we talk about big political subjects, but in our homes, especially in India and actually everywhere, I don't think India is particularly special. I think in the West they hide it much better than in India. But in India there's a little more unawareness. But there is a class. All these things are playing out everywhere, and maybe just there's a difference of degrees actually, and. So it's the unawareness that you are exercising privilege is what I'm talking about in this film, and it has to be done in an intimate setting. It cannot be done in some sort of a general kind of a
And
way.
do you find that the camera adds an extra layer of empowerment? Is the camera doing anything in relation to them in the way in this performative way, or do you explain to them? Do you do any kind of explaining at all, like in terms of the larger scope of the film that it will play, usually all over the world? Like, do you ever have conversations with some people who appear in front of your camera in a very significant way? I mean, I think I'm curious just to know, like, do they know what's at stake in
No,
terms of being recorded?
I think no. I mean, because they don't. We explain to them, but just explaining is just you're just doing a duty.
Right.
But do they really understand? If a film comes to IDFA and thousands of people are watching it, they don't understand that if unless they come here, what exactly that entails.
Mm-hmm.
So by just telling them this is just you're doing some kind of paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when people will when they experience that, when Lakshmi experienced herself being written about, her photograph being published in a newspaper, mainstream newspaper, that's when she experiences the power. That's when she understands what this means. But otherwise, it's just theoretical knowledge, so it's telling them, what it is. But she experienced what it means to tell my story. She wants to share the story, because also when soap operas came in India, then everybody knew that everybody has a story to tell,
Mm-hmm.
because those stories were set in, when they were about normal women and mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws. So I think every woman started thinking that, okay, I have a story to tell.
Yeah.
I have some kind of oppression, exploitation, some kind of pain, suffering. So everybody had a story to tell. So there was a kind of an identification. Everybody said, yes, I am also a character. So when Lakshmi and Me comes, she's also identifying herself that, yes, I have a story to tell. I could be that character in that, story that she's seen somewhere. So there, it's coming with this self-awareness that I have a story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
And
And when someone is like at your doorstep, which we have a really beautiful clip of, when these people come, they're to your building and they're doing whatever it is they're there to do. The way they also, it's very interesting to see. It's part pride in a way, and also I think part surprise that anyone would be interested in filming them. Like their reaction to the camera is a bit mysterious. They don't know what to think, and therefore you get this very naturalistic way in which they, I think, are in everyday life. They talk the same, they act the same. There's no as we were talking about before, in Western world, we're so used to being recorded. We're so used to people with their phones, there's just an awareness of what that is, the capturing of the image, and a lot more self-consciousness, and also, I think, a lot more litigiousness in a way. Like, what is the image being used for? And is there anything these days, such as protecting your image or having control of the image? And as documentary directors, I just wonder, have the stakes risen in any way since those days of shooting like that?
I think the important thing is trust. So these are the people that I shoot with are people that I know. For example, Lakshmi, I know for 5 years. So if I'm she allows me to do this, it's because she knows me for 5 years. It's a
Right.
trust of that relationship that we are playing out in this film. And with when I turn my camera to all the migrant workers who work in a building society, like I go from my home and slightly bigger picture of a middle class housing society and how they deal with workers. These are also people that I know and I talk to. But of course, when the camera comes, there is a little bit of, okay, what are you doing? What is the kind of story you want to tell? Okay, but you can show as long as my people at home don't see it, because
Mm.
they don't know that I'm working as a maybe in an ironing shop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as long as they don't know that I'm doing this, because I ran away from home and they think I'm doing well in Bombay and I send home money, but they don't know what work I'm doing.
I see.
So something like that. So there is that awareness, but some people are very comfortable and they want to be on camera. But the important thing also within this is the cinematographer,
Yes.
because finally, it is a relationship that he makes. I may be beside him, but it's the relationship that he makes with with these people who allow him to move, etc. That itself, and it plays out again in the golden thread. We are in these huge factories where it is as where Rakesh is following workers, and it is already a relationship that he's established with them, and he's also doing labor. He's also doing, so I also talk about the labor of labor of creation of this film.
Mm-hmm.
So he's also walking the same miles as the person who's following. We
Right.
also walk, so it's it's uh, it's this contract that we are not outsiders, we are not looking at you, we are with you. And that comes from who we are, the people that we are. And but if we went into these factories and just put our cameras, and they would know, what are these people doing?
Exactly.
So it's
Or thinking it was a news piece,
a
perhaps,
news
or
piece, or what are they going to what are they going to say? Because
right.
you cannot be allowed in factories without permission. So are they like spies? Are they looking at how efficiently we work or not? So there are a lot of questions which I also include, in the sense, through their gaze, how they look back at us. So it's a
Exactly.
return gaze, which is very important, because it's like, who are you? And that's normally you would take away those shots.
Mm-hmm.
But I include that again as to reflect upon the process,
Yeah.
because I feel personally the important difference, although the film is a film is a film, but I think there's an important difference between documentary and fiction, and which is that in documentary you break the fourth wall. You suspend, because in fiction film you suspend the disbelief, but actually you suspend the belief in documentary. So always want the audience to know that there is a camera, there is a negotiation that is happening, there is a contract that has happened, there is trust or mistrust, whatever. That that part is very important. So nowadays when the film try to hide
Yeah.
and bring back the fourth wall, I find that a bit contrived,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel that the advantage of documentary, or the beauty of documentary, is actually saying that there is no fourth wall. And so I embrace that. I acknowledge that the fourth wall is me, my eyes, my crew, and we are together doing this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So and I so that therefore for me this kind of a thing is very important. I want people to look at the camera. I want people to address me. I want that participation to be shown in the film, and not as if we're fly on the wall,
Right.
yeah.
Which doesn't really exist anyway.
Anyway,
I
but
think it would be really nice actually to play back to back this clip from At Your Doorstep
yeah,
and then the first clip we have of The Golden Thread,
okay,
because we're talking about the same idea, but of course, moving into this latest film, the scale is much larger.
yeah.
The space in which you're working is much larger. And there are different politics at stake as well, which we can talk about after we watch the clips.
Right.
So if you wouldn't mind just playing back to back, that would be lovely.
तेरह
17 17
हाँ ठीक है बाद में
एक दे दिया, एक बाकी रख लिया उसने बिल। एक का पैसा दिया, एक का बाकी रखा। बोलो बाद में ले एक का। आप आगे जाओ रे, मैं चाय दिला रहा हूँ।
Give some volume.
So we go from sort of documenting and following single workers, people you know intimately, and your latest work, including work you're doing now with your new film, it has to do with groups of workers, has to do with a whole society of people that are reliant on the industry or the factory in which they've been working. I think what's so beautiful, there are many beautiful things about the golden thread, but what is so lovely, I mean, I think at first you feel like, oh, this is going to be a process film about, you know, the product itself and how it moves through the marketplace, etc. But it really is a portrait of both the place itself and the people who inhabit it, and a little bit of their life outside the factory. But mostly there is this place that is very orchestral, in fact, and that it takes hundreds of people to keep going. Um, what was your entry point into this particular subject matter specifically? Because you're also weighing in on, you know, the government, you're also weighing in on the society in which they're living, how that's changing, and how industrialization is literally undermining the ability of these people to even survive. And they all make subsistence living as it is. So if you could just sort of ground that in the context of what you wanted to convey.
Okay, so um, actually, just also coming back a little bit to what we were talking earlier. In first, I cast Lakshmi, a worker, and I look at a single worker, domestic worker. There are thousands of workers in domestic workers in Bombay, but I follow a life of one person. Then I also zoom out in that film, you know, and then we also see her as part of the social context, if not too much, but we do. And then I leave my home, and then I start filming outside, and there are millions of such workers work, you know, who are migrant workers, and who work in the service sector, giving service to housing societies. So you start from, you choose certain characters, but you're telling a universal story. So these characters tell stories of many other people. And in when you go to a factory, you are faced with thousands of people in the same place, and then the task of who are you you know, within this, from thousands of people that you're meeting every day in different hours, like who will you cast as a person to, you know. And so are you going to make this into a character story, following one character, following one worker, and understanding the worker's life? For me, in this case, it was very clear. It was, the workers are going to be in an ensemble cast, and they're going to be passing on the baton from one to the other. So we learn a little bit from the younger generation, who are who think it's not nice to work in a jute factory. And on the other hand, the older people, they still are so connected because they worked here for over 50 years, and you know, they have a very different attachment to it, ancestral attachment. You know, this is the place where they were born, their fathers worked there, their uncles worked there, you know, so great grandfather worked there. So they have a different attachment. Not the youngers don't. So, you know, I have to tell the story through many people, through women, through men, and the different experience of of this, you know, from the thousands. I have to tell these stories. So I have to collect, I have to find out. Plus, I'm also not just trying to talk about their economic identity, not just about the fact that they are oppressed workers or subsistence, but which we've seen in many films. But for me, what is important is that they are full-fledged individuals, people, complex individuals, sometimes intellectuals, sometimes very talented. And for me, that is very important, because what is the difference between me and them is that I happen to have more time to do creative labor, and they do not have the time to do creative labor, although they are as creative, more creative. That is the difference between me and them, and that's the story I want to tell. I don't want to tell just the story of some oppression, because I don't think, I also don't think that, for example, the people who allow me access into this factory, the lady called Lata Bajoria, she's amazing. She loves jute. She's promoting jute. She loves organic stuff, organic fibers. But at the same time, and she gives me full access,
Mm-hmm.
unquestionable access
Mm-hmm.
to tell the story that I want to. She doesn't want to, control the story that I want to say. But for me, I also want to tell her that, oh, organic is good, but what about the workers? What about the ecological justice? Because today you can bring back jute, but throw out the workers,
Right.
right? So I want to tell her that, this part is also very important. So for me, my stories are complex. They're not black and white, and I think they always lie in the grays of that. You cannot tell. It's not just a one line story here. It's also about jute. It's also about this factory. It's also about the ecosystem. It's also about factories being made obsolete. I mean, this is a machines being made obsolete. Now, this is uh, these factories work. They provide, their working conditions can be improved. Their salaries can be improved, but these structures can remain. These huge, like, over miles, you have thousands of, why do these factories have to become obsolete?
Hmm.
Why cannot we think in a third way? When as the worker points out, that there is no thinking about the common good, and we just think capitalists are evil, or and workers are always inefficient and unproductive. Why do we have to have these black and whites?
Hmm.
There is somewhere in between situation that can be worked out, which can be good for the ecology, and it could be good for human beings. So why is this discussion not happening? So this is what I want to convey through my film, and this cannot be just conveyed by one story. It has to have so many other stories to see these people also a little more. I don't want to get into one person's life, because that won't help me,
Right.
and I still want to keep a distance so that I can tell the larger story of capitalism. And so you look into this factory. Why am I showing so much of the factory? Why am I showing so much of the process? For me, it's also the act of seeing, because we think factory work is bad or whatever, but you also see these floors. You see how every fiber is picked up. Nothing is wasted. And this is such a beauty about India. We were the best recyclers in the world. We never had any waste till plastic came. So this film also forces you to look at the image, and look at each act and see what is happening. These are very, very eco-friendly industry. From jute itself, when it grows, it helps the ozone layer, and it helps the soil,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't need extra water because it's grown in the monsoon month. And this entire ecosystem existed in India, and we gave it up for plastic. And 50 years later, we are like, oh, jute is a fiber of the future, but you destroyed this. You just
Mm.
destroyed the lives of people. All the factories are closed down. And so it's kind of asking the question, like, even to ecologists, like, to people who are now promoting, would promote jute as, oh, as, but are you looking at the people? Are you looking at the people who are involved for hundreds of years? These workers, build our nation. And the Calcutta, for example, is very much jute money.
Mm.
The rich, a lot of rich people in India have jute money, but but the but the workers. So it's trying to say many things, and therefore it was very important that we don't limit ourselves to just some characters, and really keep that distance, to be able to have this kind of a discussion, to
Mm-hmm.
keep that distance a little bit in the film.
The symphony of voices that you do end up with in the film. I mean, I do want to talk about casting in documentary, because, again, this is a very conscious choice about who you want to pick amongst, again, this huge amount of people, this constellation of people. Is that through research? Is that through Tell me a little, take me a little
It's
bit,
about my relationship with them.
but
I,
is it,
I,
is
I,
it, is it improvisational in some
it's an
cases?
instinct.
It's
I
instinctual.
see a face and I see, okay, uh, I'm able to see that this person will be able to play themselves well because you're also playing yourself.
Exactly.
And for example, Lakshmi, you look at her, she through the film, she's never ever self-conscious.
Hmm.
She just plays herself so well because the camera is there and just has the capability of just being herself, which a lot of people don't have. They may be very, very interesting, but when the camera comes, they become self-conscious. So
Right.
it's something I know instinctually, that this person, and then my relationship with them, and I know the face. Now you look at the faces of the workers. So when you look at the poor people in the West, you see they have lost a lot. But in India, you see a lot of grace and dignity in these faces,
Hmm.
and they're not very rich people. And that for me is very important to tell that part of the story as well. So that I do through casting, the faces that I'm showing and what they can bring, that spirit that they can, unspoken spirit that they can exude through their eyes. That's so important.
Yes.
So it's your relationship. You know the potential. When you meet people, you can see. Like when I met Tantri, that girl, I just knew she has to be there. In whatever way, because you look at her and you're just like, wow.
Yeah. She's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, apart from that spirit,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. So with Kasim, or and how they can be different, and that's also important. And the word that you use, the symphony, I think in my new film, which is about the farmers' protest, that is it's a symphony, because said, oh, do you have characters, and how is it going to be? How am I going to tell a story of the farmers' protest over a year with hundreds of thousands of workers? How do I tell this story? If I just no one farmer would be enough to tell the story of that collective. So it has to be a symphony, of characters. So the film has to be like an orchestra, and each character has to be, maybe it's a violin, it's a viola, somebody is a flute, so it's going to be a symphony, that film,
Hmm.
which through various characters,
Hmm.
women, men, old, young, landless, rich. It's a symphony that the farmers created over 1 year, and so it's not about one character.
Hmm. And you and Rakesh embedded yourselves in that environment
Rakesh
with
was not
them.
shooting that film,
Ah,
unfortunately.
okay.
That's the
Okay.
first time I had it. My latest film, I don't have my team, but
Oh, interesting.
Neeraj will do the sound design, so I have that. But I could not. I mean, it was COVID time, so there
Yeah.
were very few people. We shot through a whole year of COVID,
Wow.
and so yeah, it was difficult to get any crew at the time, but
Yeah,
we did
I
it.
can
So I
imagine.
worked with a very young crew, very, very, very beautiful, very dedicated people as well. So yeah.
Nice. Well, in the time we have left, I would like to show this last clip we have of Golden Thread, because aside from the casting and the documentation and following them in terms of what's at stake, I picked this clip because you do something so beautiful. You actually like dip into the dream lives
Mm.
of some of your characters, which is for me such a generous gesture towards the people who are sharing their lives with your camera. You're allowing them to show, as you said, that creative side, that in their very little spare time, they automatically turn to what makes them laugh, what makes them happy, what brings them joy, which is whatever it is they're doing, singing, reciting poetry. So I wanted to show this clip, and have a few concluding words from you. That would be great.
Yes.
If we could play that. Thank you.
घर के लिए कोई हमें प्यार कर ले झूठा ही सही पल भर के लिए कोई हमें प्यार कर ले झूठा ही सही 2 दिन के लिए कोई इकरार कर ले 2 दिन के लिए कोई इकरार कर ले झूठा ही
That's some awesome sound work right there.
Yeah.
It's really, really, and the cutting as well. This is also something so lovely because you show the real beauty of the people and their lives, and the cameras, the way the camera's moving. It's just this. For me, that segment just really weaves beautifully this fictional element you're talking about that you can create through documentary. And then, of course, the real situation, which is carting around 800 pounds of jute on his head and laboring, every day. So, yeah, I just think throughout the whole film, this way in which you've woven this kind of full exposure of who these people are rather than as just workers is really a high level of difficulty. And I think, it's interesting to watch your trajectory, as well as you described, to sort of start very specifically, but then keep that spirit of who that person is and how they might, as you say, play themselves in front of the camera. Um, for you alluded to Farming the Revolution, your next film. I mean, is this going to be done in a similar spirit, or is this much more grounded in the socio-political situation of these workers, or as here, are you going to try and combine them both?
Oh, I mean both, but not in this way, but another sort of a way. So I think in that situation, I found out that uh, the Punjabi, especially the Punjabi farmers, and they're so rooted in their language and culture, and the way they speak, it's so idiomatically, always, sometimes with examples. They have so many stories to tell, and and they're poets, they're singers. I mean, literally all of them are like, surprised. Either they're reciting somebody's poetry, or they are reciting their own poetry. So it's that part that I'm also showing. So because we think some farmers are some sort of village idiots or something, but far from it. These are very, very actualized individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the most amazing part of this. And so yeah, I mean, that is very much aspect. And then I don't go into their personal lives as much, but we
Right.
do catch very intimate and personal moments while they are at the border for a year. So we are with them. So we do actually capture that. but
Mm-hmm.
but uh, but you see them, I mean, other than just in protest mode. What is the protest mode when you're living on the roadside for a whole year? You're not like just with a flag or slogans all the time. You're doing, most of the time, what are you doing? You're cooking, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You're cooking your 3 meals, and you're feeding each other, and you're doing, all other kind of labor. And the most important aspect of farming is you grow something, and you have to have the patience to see it grow. So you need patience, and you need labor. And so that is, with that, those are the two ingredients that a farmer would, put into his work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you also need to create some kind of a revolt or revolution, in a way. So you need a lot of patience.
And a way to
So
create a film as well.
and then I learn from them. So I take, so they pass on the baton to me, and I have to have the patience. I have to show the same patience
Yeah.
also in terms of to grow that film. So this is the way I'm working, very organically, in terms of I don't go with a concept, and I also say, okay, what is the situation? I don't go by, oh, this is how I want the image to look and this quality. But sometimes it's easier with a smaller camera to shoot.
Sure.
Don't want to be, there with a big camera, big setup. Who are you? What do you want to tell? But you just want to be little inconspicuous, and fit in, like a small crew can fit in somewhere, but not like with huge cameras and things. So the style of filming also comes by what I want to convey, what feeling I want to convey in the film. So again, very small setup,
Mm-hmm.
also in Farming the Revolution, capturing capturing a really large picture, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you, Nishtha. This was
thank
so delightful to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you, and
much.
congratulations on the new film. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yep. And thank you
Thank
all
you.
for joining us.